Hello, everyone. I'm Jason. I pastor a church in Walnut Creek, California, and this is Rethink Religion. The words of Psalm 6 are really hard to hear. Take a listen. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am faint. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. My soul is in deep anguish. How long, Lord? How long? Lord, turn and deliver me. Save me because of your unfailing love. Among the dead, no one proclaims your name. Who praises you from the grave? I am worn out from my groaning. All night long I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow. They fail because of all my foes. Away from me, all you who do evil, for the Lord has heard my weeping. The Lord has heard my cry for mercy. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be overwhelmed with shame and anguish. They will turn back and suddenly be put to shame. We all have moments when we all feel like God is basically holding a grudge against us, like God is out to get us. God has some agenda, some bias, some reason that he is just pouring out his wrath and pouring out his anger on us. We all have moments where we feel like we are nothing more than God's plaything, God's toy, that he gets some sort of sick and twisted joy out of watching us suffer. Psalm 6 feels like getting kicked in the teeth when you are already down. We see and we hear David as he cries out and as he expresses these words, we hear him saying things like, I am exhausted, I am tired, I am worn out, and yet God, you continue to rebuke me. Lord, have mercy on me. I'm faint. I am exhausted. I am grown out. I'm groaning. I am flooding my bed with my tears, my couch with my tears. Psalm 6 is hard. It's hard to hear. And yet, like so many of the Psalms, it's real. It's real. Jesus, I was struck as I was thinking about this, Jesus says very similar things. Jesus himself had a very similar experience at the beginning of what we oftentimes refer to as Holy Week. Jesus is sitting around with the disciples and he's talking about what is to come. He's talking about what can be expected and what the Father's plan is for his life, where his life is going and headed at that point. And he says in John chapter 12, verse 27, Jesus says to his disciples, he says, look, I'm about to die. I'm going to die, and because of that, now my soul is troubled. He says, now my soul is troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it was for this very reason that I came to this hour. Jesus himself struggled and felt this grief, felt this lament, felt this sense of weariness and worn outness that Psalm 6 speaks of. But perhaps you've noticed now, as we've been going through these Psalms, perhaps you've noticed how often the psalmist will appeal to God's unfailing love in the midst of these lament psalms. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed how often these psalms will begin by pouring out and expressing grief and lament, and yet at some point in these psalms, there seems to be a time where the psalmist begins to speak of God's unfailing love? Is that surprising? It's kind of surprising to me. Because when I am in those midst, when I am in those moments of feeling enormous grief, I don't feel God's unfailing love. That's not what I feel. That's not where my mind tends to go. Then we get to verse 8. We get to verse 8, and let me read that again, where he says, away from me, away from me, all you who do evil. For the Lord has heard my weeping. The Lord has heard my cry for mercy. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be overwhelmed with shame and anguish. They will turn back and suddenly be put to shame. It's like David does a complete 180 from where he began and where he was just a couple verses prior to all of a sudden now he's expressing this sudden sense of confidence and faith in God and in what God has promised and what God is going to do. There's a trap that many of us will often fall into. A trap of believing that your lament, that your grief, that your exhaustion, that your mourning, that is a sign of weak faith. But it's not. That's not a sign of weakness. That's not a sign that you don't believe or that there's some problem that you need to fix. It's just real. It's just human. Jesus grieved. Jesus was tormented by the reality of his life and his experiences as he walked on this earth. But no one is going to sit here and to question or accuse Jesus of a lack of faith. There are times, and I think we see this with Psalm 6, there are times in our life where we hang on what we know to be true rather than what we feel. There are times when we think about our faith and we think about God's unfailing love, we know and we acknowledge we don't feel his unfailing love. We may question whether it's even there. But we hang on the confidence and the assurance of what we know. We know that God is good. We know that God has promised his unfailing love. We know that God hears and accepts our prayers. Hey everyone, did you find this episode of Rethink Religion to be encouraging, uplifting, or inspiring for you today or helpful for you today? If so, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss out on another episode. Thanks.